You're watching Station Zero.
My friends went to Mexico for a vacation and asked me to house sit and take care of their dogs while they were gone. They paid me $40 a day just to sit around and let their dogs out when they needed to go. I'm disabled, so that helps a lot. This is a semi-rural area, and houses are roughly a quarter-mile apart. Police have to come from town, 15 miles away, and response times can be well over an hour. I always take my pistol with me. It's always been quiet when I've stayed there. This time was different. I was in the shower when the dogs started barking and growling. They are big, large German shepherds, and one is actually police trained. The owners loan him to county as a drug dog, and if you tell them to be quiet, they obey. This time they didn't, so I went on high alert. I shut off the water and looked out the window. I didn't see anything, but when I walked out of the bathroom, I saw a shadow go across the bedroom window. They have lights around the house that stay on all night. I whispered to the dogs to hush, and they did. That's when I heard a man's voice. I couldn't make out everything he was saying, but I distinctly heard two words. "Come around." So I'm sure there was more than one person. I ran into the living room with my pistol and saw the door handle turn. I yelled, "I have a gun, and I will fucking use it!" I heard feet run away. I was telling Siri to dial 911 and got the county sheriff fast. She said there were two cars on another call not far away, but it would take about 20 minutes for them to get there. That's better than the usual hour, but I was pretty shaken. I explained that I was on a farm and would have to go down to the road to unlock the cattle gate to let them in, and to please tell the officers I would be carrying a pistol and please don't shoot me by mistake, because I was not going outside the house without it. The dispatcher said, "Oh no, don't go out there without your gun. I will tell them." The one good thing about living in a red state. She asked if I could see the road, and I could, so she said to wait in the house until I saw blue lights. I hung up and called my friends in Mexico. Their camera footage can be downloaded via app, and they said they would go through it while I waited for the cops. I locked the house and went down to the gate when the police arrived. They searched the whole place, including the barn, but didn't find anyone. While they were looking, my friends texted me the camera footage. There was a man on the porch. Unfortunately, the cameras were not angled to get a shot of his face, and it was of course dark. I still think there was more than one creep because of what he said. Come around. The police were very nice and said they had passed a man on a bike on the way, which is strange for this area, especially at night, and went to look for him, but that's all they could do. They took a full report but never caught the creep. My husband came and stayed with me the rest of their trip. One of their neighbors said he found a tent and some gear in the woods a few weeks before, so somebody was living back there, maybe a homeless person from town. I have house sat again since then, and it was quiet. They're going away again for Christmas, and I'll be there again. A lot of people ask me if I would have shot the creep if he had broken in. Yeah, absolutely. I would be sorry I had to hurt somebody, but if it's them and me, yeah. Creepy porch guy, let's not ever meet again. It all started about a month ago, when a man started banging at my door at 6 at night, yelling for a Mike to come out, that he needs to see him and get cigarettes. I told him he had the wrong house and to leave. There has never been a Mike in this house. He got even more aggressive, calling me a liar, and how he was going to come in and beat that skinny bitch he lived with. I tried to call the non-emergency police line because I've never called 911 before, and they didn't pick up. Looking back, it was stupid, but it was instinct. After some more yelling, he left. I called my father, who was across town, to come home and what was going on, and he showed up. He called 911 to file a report. The guy came back and started screaming at him. The cops were called again and showed up an hour after the call and couldn't find him, and told me to defend myself if it came to it. I ended up staying with a friend for the night because I didn't feel safe at home. I can be a strong person, but I don't think I can do much against a drugged out man. What made that situation even scarier to me is that as I was going through my driveway camera photos, it shows him walking up to my house hours before, and I had no clue. I have really bad anxiety, so the next few days were filled with paranoia and stress, but I managed to finally calm down and convince myself that was the end of it. Come that weekend, my father went on a trip with his girlfriend, so I was left alone for a couple of days. I had just put on a scary movie when I heard screaming again and a loud bang. I pull up my camera and see that he's back, pacing back and forth on the sidewalk, and he's thrown over our trash can, again screaming for Mike. I call 911 and they show up within minutes this time and are able to stop him down the street. They tell me there's nothing that can be done since he hasn't committed a crime yet, but if he comes back to call again, and then they'll have more reason to hold him. Things were quiet for a few weeks. I again believed that was the end of it, until today. This morning my father and I got into an argument, so I wanted to take a walk to clear my mind. I went across the street to a park and sat by a tree watching cars pass every now and then. Just beautiful morning weather. I noticed a truck drive down the side of the park and turned to the street my back is facing. He waved as he passed, so I just thought it was a man going to work. I wanted to show I was okay. He then pulls off onto the right side of the park. He stops and makes a U-turn to come back. Red flags instantly go off in my head, so I get up to start walking home. I look back and see he's turned off his headlights and is trailing me. I get to the front of my house and he slows. I get a better look at his face this time, and it looks like the man that's been harassing me. From the physical characteristics to his red baseball cap, he just glared at me like I took everything in his life away from him. I got to the door and tried to barge in, but my father put the chain on in anger of me walking out, so I had to yell to him that I was being followed and to open the door. He opens it, and by then the truck was gone down the street. I'm terrified to leave my home. I don't have a car to get anywhere quickly. I have to bike, but even now, I'm scared to do that. I don't know who that man is, or what his intentions were, but I live in paranoia, waiting. I was coming home from taking a train for a work trip. It was 11 p.m. I would usually travel the next day, but I had to come home early for a family thing. The train station where I lived at the time was outside and had no security whatsoever, so granted, I already was a little bit on edge. After waiting 20 minutes for an Uber, all alone, I was relieved to see my Uber driver. He had an accent and was from a Middle Eastern country, and the first thing he asked was if I was too. But I often get mistaken for being different nationalities, so it felt normal. I politely said no, and at first everything was normal. We made small talk since the drive was long, but then he started making odd comments, saying I was beautiful, asking if I had an American boyfriend, and if my parents wanted me married. I dodged his questions, but then as we were 5 minutes away from my apartment, he asked if I was doing anything that night. It was a Friday. I said no, and I didn't plan on it. He then asked if I lived alone. I do, but I was getting scared, so I said I had 3 roommates, and they were expecting me. That seemed to make him stop, and he remained silent the whole ride. I then get notified I had a package. Unfortunately, my apartment would charge if you didn't retrieve the packages after a certain time frame. As soon as we reach my apartment, I get out and use my keycard to go to the package room, which was in a separate room from my apartment entrance. I look outside, and he's still parked out front looking around. The way the apartment works is that you have to go outside to go to the actual entrances. One entrance has stairs, the other with the elevator was in the parking garage. I take a deep breath, holding my package, and start to run. He gets out and starts to run, chasing me. Using my keycard, I make it to the stairs entrance and slam the door and run up the stairs. As I get into my room, I look out my window and saw him still outside his car. Being on the 3rd floor, my lights were on and he looked right at my window. He stayed parked the whole night and then eventually drove away. I reported him on Uber and was extremely cautious the whole week, but I still don't know what he was planning to do, and I'm grateful my parents made me do running as a kid. So creepy Uber driver, let's never meet again. My girlfriend's mother is a long-time heroin user and has been in and out of jail for my girlfriend's whole life. When she lived with her mother and her mother's husband, she witnessed physical abuse and drug activity. She was forced to move out at a very young age in order to stay alive. She thought her mother was finally clean when her mother announced her pregnancy. After getting over the initial shock, My girlfriend decided to be supportive of her mother since she thought she was clean. That was until her mother overdosed while pregnant. She decided to cut all contact at that point. My girlfriend is also a mandated reporter, and last year reported her mother and her mother's husband to the state since she knew it wasn't a safe situation for the baby. The baby died in their house not even a month after birth due to an overdose with signs of physical abuse. My girlfriend's mother was arrested for the murder of her baby and other charges. Her husband was arrested for child endangerment and other charges very recently. At first, the judge did not grant either of them bail. Eventually, her husband was granted bail, in which he posted. We did not know this until recently, which helped us put some of the pieces together. My girlfriend and I like to sit outside her house, in the car, and just chat or listen to music. Recently, there have been black cars around my girlfriend's house. She also is frequently followed by black cars when she drives me home. It's the same couple of black cars that do this. They're not just random ones. At first we thought we were just being paranoid, since everyone was still in jail. But when we found out that the husband was out of jail, we began to doubt our insanity. The first major thing happened after my girlfriend and I went on a dinner date. We got home after dark and sat in her car for about 45 minutes before we noticed the same black car passing us every few minutes. After 10 minutes of that, a different car drove towards us, flicking its high beams on. When it got close enough for us to see who was inside, it swerved into the oncoming lane, and I genuinely thought it was going to hit the passenger side of the car. It sped away and we ran inside. After that, we started noticing the black cars more and more. This past Wednesday morning, around 3 a.m.-ish, the same distinct black van that we had been seeing pulled up outside of my house. This was weird because my girlfriend and I live about 30 minutes from each other in two separate cities. A man got out of the van and shined a flashlight through my yard, scanning it almost. He shined the flashlight up at the window I was sitting at, kept it there for a second, then walked 30 feet to an empty driveway, scanned around there for 20 seconds before getting in the van and peeling away. The windows were ice cream covered and frozen, so I couldn't make out the specifics of the van, but it was strange. A few nights later, my girlfriend and I spent some time hanging out in the car when we spotted a black van hiding behind another parked car further up the street. We could only see one headlight, but it creeped by us as we sat in the car. My girlfriend lives between two dead-end streets. Think of a very blocky U. She lives between the two prongs. The van went up the first dead end, 4 ways on, and sat for a few minutes before turning around and driving almost into the other lane of traffic to get close to us. It then went up another dead end and stayed put. We thought it was weird that the van didn't just back out of the first dead end, instead opting to drive all the way up the narrow street and turn around. After a few minutes, we called a friend and recounted the story just to get an extra opinion. While my girlfriend was talking to our friend, I got out of the car to go for a cigarette and to see how far away the van was. I walked up the dead-end street that the van was on for about 15 feet before getting the worst gut feeling I've ever gotten. Across the street from me was a black mass, which was darker than the darkness around it. I decided to just turn around and rush my girlfriend into the house. Later that night, we heard a bang coming from downstairs, followed by what sounded like a boot on wooden stairs. We locked the bedroom door, and I sat against the door with a baseball bat, hoping to barricade it. A few minutes later, we heard a car door slam before the sound of tires squealing and a car driving away. Our initial idea was maybe it came from the TV, but we had paused it, and the TV in the next room is never loud enough to feel real. When I went downstairs an hour later to get water, there was nothing damaged or missing. We theorized that maybe it was the sound of the front door trying to be opened, even though it was deadbolted. My girlfriend's exterior wall doesn't face the road, and we've never heard car sounds before. It is, however, next to a private driveway, and sometimes we'll hear her grandparents' car door close or the neighbors backing out. The next day, I was shoveling the sidewalks at my girlfriend's house, an activity that took about 20 minutes, and I saw the same black Chevy Silverado with mud streaks on the tailgate. It circled the block about 4 times. I was able to see the silhouette of the man driving through the passenger side window, and each time it was the same man and same truck. My girlfriend lives in a small town, and we were able to catalogue the neighborhood cars. The black van and truck are abnormal. Our theory is that someone is trying to scare my girlfriend into not testifying, or flat out making sure neither of us ever have the ability to testify. We really just need more opinion. Are we just being paranoid, or is this something we should actually be worried about? Do you think these are just weird coincidences? For context, I am now 26, and I met my stalker at 14. So when I was 14, I decided to take ballroom dance classes. That was kind of normal for teenagers in my generation in my country. There you had to change partners each song, so every girl would dance with every boy. In my group, that consisted of mostly teens between the ages of 14 to 17, there was a really tall, almost 2-meter, 21-year-old guy named Philip. We had a nice chat the times we danced, but he seemed weird. Because I was young and naive, and that's how I normally made friends, I told him where I lived when he asked me. So the stalking began. At that time, I did not realize that it was stalking. I just thought he had a lot of free time and that it was annoying. Philip would ride on his bike from his home. He lived 1 or 2 towns over, to my house and asked if I wanted to spend time outside with him and play. After doing that for a few times, I asked my parents to tell him that I was not home when he would come over. Both my parents and I were very oblivious about his actions for a very long time. At one point in time, the stalking ended for a few weeks, and Philip also did not come to dance classes. At that time, I became part of a friend group of a boy I fancied. For some months, he had a girlfriend, but they split up soon after, and I became his girlfriend. Unfortunately, Philip was also friends with the best friend of my boyfriend, so he had also been part of the friend group. They told me Philip was in a mental hospital. In the span of his stalking, Philip was in mental hospitals multiple times, and every time he was, I was glad because I had some peace. When I was 16, my family and I had to move because our landlady had thrown us out. She wanted to live on the property herself. So we moved to 1 town over. We started living 2 streets away from my stalker. And every time Philip was out of the hospital, he would be at my house. It was not as often, but still. At my father's birthday, he rang again, and because my family had guests, they told me to open the door, and there he was, looming over me, like a dark, menacing shadow man. I told him to leave, and I tried to close the door, but he blocked it. So I was standing there, afraid, begging him to leave. At one point, I even ran inside to get my dad to send him away, but my dad said, "He's your friend, so it's your problem." So I went back to the door and I begged and pleaded that Philip please leave. At one point, he was kneeling, sitting in my doorway. After almost 2 hours, he finally left. And at that point, it was obvious for me. Finally, I had realized what type of behavior it was. He was a stalker, and he was fixated on me. The next day, I sat down my parents, and I told them that I was afraid of Philip. And my dad also apologized to me for putting me in that situation and not helping me. The next time Philip came to my house, my dad was there and told him I do not want any contact with him. So he left. After a few more incidents like that, he stopped showing up at my door, and I thought we got rid of my stalker. But every time I started to live happily, starting to forget my fear of him, a letter, an email, or a gift showed up and would send me back into my fears. At 20, I was out of school, and to pass the year, I had to wait to start my job. I worked in a grade school, in a voluntary after-school care club for grade schoolers. After a month or two later, my mom woke me up in the morning and told me to get dressed because she had called the cops. Apparently, Philip was again sitting at our door every morning and asked for me, and my parents didn't tell me so I wouldn't get scared again. Finally, after the cops told Philip 3 times to leave and he ignored them, they arrested him, and he screamed and screamed my name, and that he was burning for me and that the cops hurt him. My parents and I were standing in the kitchen, listening. The situation was so absurd, and so much for me, that I started laughing hysterically. We filed a report at the police for stalking and trespassing, but the officers said that they could not do anything because he hadn't hurt me physically. We tried to get a restraining order, but it didn't go through. A week later, Philip had snuck into our garden, and like in a movie, he threw rocks at my window. Idiot me opened the window, but did not see anything until it clicked, and I ran downstairs and told my dad that my stalker was in the garden. Unfortunately, when we went out to check, Philip was gone. A week after that, I was in the kitchen cooking when Philip rang the doorbell again, and because we have no way of seeing who is at our door, I opened it. And there he was again, telling me that he missed me, and saying he had peeked through the blinds of the windows in the living room the past week to see if I was there. My parents were not home. If they had been, I would have ran. But like this, I had to swallow my fear and stand in the doorway, listening to Philip talk, until my new boyfriend came. I had sent him an SOS message, and he was on his way. After my boyfriend arrived, he told Philip to leave, and he did. Philip mentioned in passing that he now has a girlfriend. After that, I did not see Philip again for a long time. A friend told me that he was taken by men in white coats because he believed that his mom was possessed by the devil. I was glad. It wasn't until 2 years later when I got a letter from court. I was a witness and told to attend an assault case regarding Philip. Apparently, after coming out of the mental hospital, he had a big fight with his girlfriend and hit her, and because she was scared, she played dead. Philip called an ambulance, and the police finally had something against him. After the hearing, he was again admitted to a mental hospital, and I finally got a restraining order, and he was ordered to stay at least 30 meters away from our property. The restraining order also stated that if he broke any of the requirements, he would go to jail. So it was over. 2 years ago, I also moved out of my parents' house. I'm posting this only now, because I believe I'm seeing him again. But it can't be. He doesn't know where I live, and he hasn't shown up at my parents' house. But I believe I've seen him when I leave the house. I just need reassurance that it's not him again, and that I'm safe at my home. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And turn on the bell to be up to date on our latest uploads. And remember, don't change the channel.